Hi there, I'm Ahsan is and you're watching me on YouTube and Facebook Live. Today we are going to talk about that philosophy lost its way in the 20th century. It has now become more of a thing of academia. It is because read any of the philosophical news article in the newspaper or in the journal or search it out in the Google online or any of the philosophical online platform, then you will see that you will find that it would be discussion and analysis on the theories of philosophers, late philosophers, and references to their articles and their artwork, and and it would be difficult for anyone, for any person, to make sense of it. The purpose of philosophy is to make people wise, so they could have a better living. But it has lost its way. When I say better living, what is the purpose of life here on earth? The existential philosophy. And that's our topic for discussion today. And my guest is Edward Konowicz, and he has joined us from Virginia, United States. Hey, Ed,
Yeah, hi everybody.
I'm doing good. It's good to see you after a very long time. Hey,
Yeah,
Melissa.
it feels like a year.
Yeah, it feels like a year. It's only been a week, but we didn't go live last week. It's only been a gap of 14 days, but it feels like in a year.
Yeah.
So, how do you approach this topic? Philosophy lost its way, and I agree with you that philosophy lost its way. What about the existential philosophy? I think I would say that the science has taken the place of philosophy. Science is making the life, to some extent, we can say, science is making the lives of people, lives better of ordinary people than philosophy.
Well, it's not totally true.
Hmm.
Uh, I, there were still philosophy majors when I was in college,
Hmm.
and existentialism was was very common and dominating philosophy at the time. And I'd like to discuss existentialism,
Hmm.
but existentialism was sort of replaced by American positivism, which is a
Mhm,
belief that science was how we solve human problems. And
mhm,
it's not how we solve human problems. Nazi
mhm,
Germany was based on science and was a
mhm,
big problem, a huge
mhm,
problem. And it was out of this atmosphere of the rise of Germany and its sciences that people began questioning the role of science, some seeing it as heroic and others seeing it as a threat to human freedom. So existentialism stood on both sides as religion collapsed. And the existentialists summarized it incorrectly. I'm going to be very critical of existentialists because I think they, to a large extent, killed philosophy. Now, they inspired me, despite the fact that they killed philosophy, they did inspire a lot of my thinking.
mhm,
But what the basis of existentialism was, it came out of phenomenology, which is asking, how do we know something? And
mhm,
after World War II, it became clear that governments were propaganda blocks, including science, that Germany was a propaganda block, and you could no
mhm,
longer trust science.
mhm.
So, since you couldn't trust science, you had to go to your experience. So, you had to let
But
your experience, which is your existence, be the judge.
what about the modern discoveries of science, like the telephone, like the internet technology, and all of these things? They have made our lives better, but philosophy hasn't.
Repeat that. The sound was a little broken up.
Okay. What about the modern discoveries? Look at the modern discoveries, scientific discoveries like the internet, technology, telephone, and many other things. They have made our lives better. The philosophy, the science has to some extent. I'm not
Well,
going to
we
go in the
we
details because you're going. We can. There will be a disagreement that that science has made or made not. But to some extent, we can say that science has made our lives better. To some extent, not completely, to some extent. But the
well
philosophy, when you look at but the
we
philosophy
need to
hasn't.
we need to get philosophical here. Engineering
Okay.
has made our lives
Mhm.
better, not
Mhm.
necessarily
Engineering.
science.
Engineering. Okay.
You have to
So,
distinguish between
mhm.
engineering
Between
and
engineering.
technology and
Mhm.
science. Science's
Mhm.
opinions or
Mhm.
theories about the nature of reality.
Mhm.
Technology is using tools
Hey,
and
Linda.
and advance
Thank you, Melissa. Mhm.
advanced understanding of
Mhm.
chemistry and physics in order to implement those tools, or whether it's communication better. But I don't think my
Mhm.
grandchildren live a better life because of technology. They now
Mhm.
spend much of their time in the house playing games online with other kids. When I was their
Mhm.
age, I was out playing in the woods, playing baseball,
Mhm.
football. I spent most of my time outside with my friends. My
Mhm.
grandchildren spend most of their time inside on the computer. I don't think that's better.
Yes. Yes, agree. Now, let's get back to the existential philosophy. Good
Good
morning,
morning,
live.
everyone.
Yes. Now let's get back to the existential philosophy and
Yeah.
your
Well,
criticism on it.
there's two aspects of it.
Mhm.
One is that they realize religion failed.
Mhm.
We get that in Nietzsche, Nietzsche,
Mhm.
or however you want to pronounce it, said God
Niche
was
or
dead. He said
yes.
God is dead.
Mhm.
There's no reason to believe in God. And then the existentialist said, well, if God is dead, then life is absurd. So we have the absurd school in literature, Ionesco. We have the influence of nihilism and painting.
Mhm. Nihilism. Yes.
We have it, and they were wrong. They were
Mhm.
raised usually from Catholic universities. And the question of whether life is absurd, which is
Mhm. Or
expressed
not.
in the myth of Sisyphus,
Mhm. I like
is not
the
based
link
upon
you.
God. It's not based, God has nothing to do with it.
Yes, I love that link. I studied the article. It was amazing that life, we can live it life, we can enjoy life without focusing on its purpose.
Right.
As simple as that.
Well, so it's not necessarily absurd. Now, the myth of Sisyphus
Mm-hmm.
is
Yes.
Sisyphus has to push this big rock up a
Mm-hmm.
hill. He's got to put, then it rolls back down again, and he
Uh-huh.
doesn't get anywhere.
Mhm.
And Camus says, well, at least he's happy. He comes down and does it again. He's accepted his fate and tries to enjoy it. But I don't think that's the issue.
Mhm.
Now, the reason why we see that, and it has to do with physics. When we get to the
Okay.
20th century, we get a great emphasis on entropy. Entropy is that everything decays. Everything
Mhm.
goes from a higher energy ordered state and spreads out to a lower energy soup.
Mhm.
So the
Mhm.
universe is going to eventually expand into a thin layer of matter and have no
Mhm.
meaning because it will, through entropy, lose all its order, lose,
Mhm.
degrade all its high energy. So entropy affected existentialists, but they were not either honest enough or intelligent enough to discuss the concept of physics and entropy.
Mhm.
So this is a severe limitation, which is we have to
Mhm.
consider, and I do mean
Mhm.
have to, that a
Mhm.
tree reverses entropy. A tree takes me, so just the rock reminds me of a pyramid which ascends much descend. Well, okay, that's a little different. I mean, the building of the pyramids is sort of little, trying to avoid the myth of Sisyphus since they last thousands of years, because most buildings only last 200 or 300 years. So you build a building, and this is the major cities, and the building's destroyed in 200 years. You got to build a new building. So that's sort of like the myth of Sisyphus. And the pyramids have been around thousands of years. So they look almost like a violation of the myth of Sisyphus. But I want to get into the concept here, which is most people, they live their lives, they have their families or their occupations or both, and then they slowly age and die. And then it goes on again in the next generation. So it looks like the myth of Sisyphus.
Yeah,
It looks like
we are going around the circle. It's a circle of life, just like a post on social media that people are dying, then born again. The circle of life is going on over and over again. Then what's the purpose of our life living here?
right, and that's
Isn't
the
it absurd?
existentialists address
Yes,
that. And
yes.
they say, well, we have to engage. I mean, this is Sartre says we have to engage life with good faith, which is we have to do and enjoy what we engage with, and our good faith and our sincerity produces our enjoyment. Well, that's okay, but it takes
Yes, I
600.
like it.
He takes 600, 800 pages to say it, and I just said it in 20 seconds. I
Yes,
mean, why are you going to take 800 pages to
to
say
say
something simple?
yes.
And I read
Life
the
is simple.
800 pages, and they write
Okay.
so well.
Okay,
They
that's why you're angry because he wasted your time.
right. I as the myth of Sisyphus to read the book.
Okay.
The existentialists cannot summarize.
Mhm.
They miss the point. They say if
Okay.
God is dead, which is religion is no longer relevant, your life is
Mhm.
absurd. Well, that's not the truth. Nothing to
Mhm.
do with God. It has to do with,
Okay.
do you reincarnate? Do you live after your life? Because obviously
Mhm.
people don't learn that much in one lifetime. But if
Mhm.
they have hundreds or thousands of lifetimes, then there
Mhm.
may be a pattern where it's not absurd. They're learning something in each lifetime.
Yes.
So it's not based upon, the old man with the beard, some god
Mhm.
or deity. It's based on whether you have a soul. And
Mhm.
older philosophers like Plato, they felt we did have a soul. So life wasn't
That.
absurd because you had this one journey, this one lifetime was one trip, but you'll have
Mhm.
many trips. And this is
Mhm.
sort of Hindu. And I
That's
have
why I
no
like.
idea.
Uh, I
I,
like this theory of consciousness that we all are connected. Is we become a part of nature. We have been the part of nature, and we will be part of nature. It's just we are changing our forms or shifting our
yeah,
forms. Transformation from one form to another.
and even if we don't change our forms
Mhm.
to the next level of consciousness, if we're like a ghost, you
Yes.
may
Okay.
develop. I mean, we're born as babies, can't do anything but
Hmm.
cry and smile and coo. And when we die, we could be born as baby ghosts, can't do anything. But what
Yes.
happens after
Hmm.
what we call 100 years or 1,000 years? So it's not the existentialists were preoccupied with God. They said, well,
Hmm.
God doesn't exist. Life is absurd. And I say, no,
Hmm.
it doesn't depend. If God exists, like in the Old Testament, many
Hmm.
of the ancient Jews did not believe there was life after death. God
Hmm.
existed, but you're
Hmm.
dead, you're dead. So it's not
Yes.
based on God, it's based on whether you progress from this lifetime to something higher. And people
Yes.
do learn something in their minds.
Hmm.
Some don't, some minds
Hmm.
deteriorate and
Yes.
their body decays. So it's really based more on the debate whether your mind or soul survives. And the existentialists generally don't talk about it. they avoid
Mhm,
it like the plague. Camus wrote
mhm.
the book, The Plague.
Yes, before discussing the life after death, I think the better question is what was life before before our existence, before our birth? Because if we know how we were before our birth, then we would be able to answer the question that how is going to be the life after that?
Yeah,
So
well,
we
I
have to
remember. I remember
yes,
like 3 or 4 seconds before I was born. I actually
yes,
remember choosing
mhm,
to be born as a human
mhm,
being, and
mhm,
it was very painful because I had to forget everything. To be born as a human, I would lose all the memory of my previous existence. So it's like starting from scratch. It's like dying. You're starting from scratch. Um, but you can't go by my memory. That's important to me, which is existentialism.
yes,
Existentialism is saying what I
mhm,
experience is important to me. May not be
mhm,
important to you,
mhm,
but
yes.
my memory is important to me. And that's important because
Mhm.
before
So,
that, you had to reference the Bible or the Quran, you had to reference a holy work or theologian. Your experience didn't count.
yes.
You had to
And
read truth in the book.
Linda has got a very good comment here. It is about the advancement of consciousness, not about presumed soul and body existing to another dimensional frequency as a form of escape.
You can look at it that way, and I think that's
Yeah.
what Camus looked at it. And that's why he was a
Mhm,
Marxist. He saw the collective consciousness of culture, which Heidegger called inframing, that we were inframed in culture, and culture evolved. But then
mhm,
we're moving out of existentialism when we begin to talk about the evolution of culture or collective consciousness.
mhm,
Existentialism is more based on experience, which is good. We need
mhm.
that. We can't believe
Yes.
the TV. We can't believe
Mhm,
the political or medical authorities. We have to check with people we know, people that have experienced something similar to us. We have to do our own investigation because the
mhm,
authorities are compromised by money and politics.
mhm,
And existentialism began that, which was good, but they were too busy looking at the old system and not thinking about what was
mhm.
emerging. They didn't really
Yes.
see the threat that technology would impose, which is
And
conformity.
that is our topic, that philosophy has lost its way, and now it has become a bit more a thing of academia. The philosopher has lost its way from the practical mindset. They are supposed to be practical. They're
Right.
supposed to make people wise, and that's not what is happening right now or today or in today's world.
Yeah, it's totally absurd, whether
Mhm,
it's Sartre or Camus, to spend
mhm.
800 pages talking about being practical. It's just crazy. They,
Yes,
they
I
they go
understand.
on and on and on and on, and they write so well. They're so well educated. You read
Mhm,
on and on and on and on and
mhm,
on, and then you got to
mhm,
say, well, what's this person really saying? And then you
mhm.
realize they can't summarize. And
Yes.
philosophy was supposed to be that summa cum laude. You want to be able to have the summary, the sum
Mhm,
of what are the ideas. You need the conclusions. And they were
mhm,
very poor at the conclusions. And I have to
mhm,
wonder whether they were members of some secret society or something, because
mhm,
they were so concerned with buzzwords.
mhm,
Whether it's phenomenology, um,
mhm,
what's another one they used a lot.
mhm.
Um,
The essence.
but they would rehash something over and over again,
Mhm,
like overcooked meal. They just kept cooking
mhm,
it until it was almost disappearing. Now I
mhm,
could, and other intellectuals, read the 600 or 800 pages, like with Sartre's Being and Nothingness, and come to a few of his good ideas, like mauvais foi. Mauvais
mhm,
foi is French for bad faith that people lied to themselves. And this is a fundamental human problem, that people lie to themselves. And that's good. Not that people lie to themselves, that you recognize it's a psychological problem. So we had a development that ended of cognitive psychology that would deal with people's internal dialogue, which was what Kierkegaard, who was religious, dealt with how you deal with faith inside yourself. How do you maintain an ethical, strong existence, and what compromises you? So Kierkegaard was somewhat concerned with ethics, or being moral, being honest, and the debate that goes through you when you're doing this. But that died. The modern world did not want an existential debate about ethics. They want to say, here's the science, here's the truth, do not question it. And the existentialists did give birth to what's called philosophy of science. And when I was in college, you could take a philosophy of science course, which dealt with the history of science and what theories are knowable, which ones are guesses, how has science changed, and what are their habits of thought and culture. And people don't consider that anymore. They just want to see science as truth. They don't want to see it as a subculture within a larger culture that has a historical basis. So existentialism gave rise to that, but the Camus, Sartre, Heidegger, these guys are so voluminous in their writings, there's no way the average person has the time to read it. You would have to major in philosophy and then not talk to anyone. How could you sit down and cover 300 pages with someone? I mean, I'm overwhelmed. How am I going to cover existentialism without reading 10,000 pages again and summarizing it?
And it is even difficult for ordinary person to read and understand and comprehend and make summary out of it. It's very difficult for ordinary person. It is supposed to be simple and concise so people could understand it. They could, they could become wise.
Yes, and I think that's my skill as a philosopher. Existentialism was based on your experience, because the authorities, particularly after World War II, were no longer credible sources of reference. So you had to use your own life and your own internal dialogue to verify much of existence. So it's you're using your existence to verify truth, and that was good. But the conclusion that there's either God or no God, no, that's not the only possibility. And they came out of Catholic Europe to a large extent with this concept: if you don't believe in God, it's absurd. Well, you don't need a heaven or hell. Reincarnation could be part of it. You could be part of the collective unconsciousness. I mean, a lot of people read Carl Jung because he talks about the collective unconscious. He talks about how we tap into thousands of years of human thought, and we become part of the ancestors. Now, do we reincarnate?
This is what is happening. This is also happening right now in Saudi Arabia, that if you don't believe in God, then you would be considered mentally ill, and they would put you in the jail or in the rehabilitation center to make you believe in God. And most of the Muslim countries, it is happening right now, and the dark ages in the Muslim world hasn't passed yet.
Yeah, it is dark. It is dark
Yes.
because there's no disagreement allowed. And philosophy was supposed to be disagreement. You're taught this in culture. Let's examine if it's true. And you can use reasoning to prove it's not true. And that was building in Europe, with Galileo, Copernicus. And the existentialists just made it much to, the term is didactic, much too scholarly, so the average person could not read or understand their ideas. And they
mhm,
refused to consider that consciousness survives either before your life or afterwards. They really
mhm.
refused to consider that the mind could survive the body. And as a
Yes,
result of
and
it, they said,
it's a very relevant comment here from Linda. Our purpose on this planet is not to escape being human, but to learn to become something more than you have been and you can be yet. You can
yeah,
get it.
survival may be based upon
Mhm,
learning. We're supposed to
mhm,
learn how to be more compassionate, intelligent, more harmonious, and
mhm,
something jeopardizes this. So religion is still popular because there really is, quote, evil in the world. There is
mhm,
this pressure to stop thinking. And if it
mhm,
frequently comes from religion, so here's the contradiction.
mhm,
Religion is appealing because we recognize there's an attack on reasoning, that
mhm.
reasonable, compassionate, honest people are targeted. So we say, oh, there's a devil, there's Satan, there's something bad. But then religion doesn't let you think on your own. Religion
Yes.
becomes the great Satan
Mhm. Oh,
be-
religion
because
is
you're
the
supposed to
hurdle towards
progress your
religion.
thinking.
Yes, religion is the main hurdle towards reasoning and a rational mindset, or it
And
is
we
true
have
in
to
my
be
part of the
careful
world. Yes.
because the rational mindset is
Mhm,
being associated with science, and
mhm,
science is controlled by profit. It's not
mhm,
like these scientists are are honest people.
mhm,
If they find the wrong findings in their studies, they don't get their job, they don't get their grant. So
mhm,
there's
yes.
no rational science. The big propaganda today is science is rational, and the truth of it
Mhm,
is science is corrupt, is controlled
mhm.
by government and corporations. It's
Well,
controlled by money. Science is
science
not
has
rational.
science has replaced the religious place with the place of religion. Now, science is the new religion
Yeah, science
that
has
doesn't
become
want you.
the new
The new
religion.
religion. Yes. It doesn't want you to think outside of their boundaries and their box. And if you think outside of it, then you would lose your credibility, your job, and everything. And they would label you as a conspiracy theorist to 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 discredit
Discredit.
your, yeah, discredit your identity and your validity. So anything you would be saying, it would be falls in the category of conspiracy theory. That is what is happening right now in today's world.
Well, science has become
Mhm,
not rational, but
mhm. Yes,
conforming. Everyone's
yes,
supposed to be treated
conformist.
as if they're the same person, the same human being, as if their genetics aren't different, as if their
Mhm,
different life experiences, as if their immunity systems aren't different. So it's
mhm.
one treatment for all. It's an assembly
Yes,
line. Everyone's
yes,
supposed to get the vaccines, everyone's supposed to wear the masks. There's
mhm,
no recognition of individual differences. So
yes,
science is not rational. It's about
mhm,
conformity.
yes,
Science has become basically the new fascism, the new dictatorship, where everyone
mhm,
has to do the same thing.
yes. And I think that should be our topic for the next week about science versus philosophy, because we have to discuss so many things, and it would be overwhelming for our viewers to to comprehend, to understand everything in just one episode. We have to dissect this topic one by one and discuss
Okay,
it in detail.
yeah,
And
let
yeah,
me
yes, summarize it.
let
Summarize
me
it.
summarize. Basically, one of the existential books was called The Irrational Man, which is the
Mhm,
existentialists were afraid to challenge science.
mhm,
They knew technology was a threat from Nazi
mhm,
Germany. So
mhm.
they promoted absurdity or irrationality
Thank
because
you, Linda.
science laid claim to being rational when it
Mhm,
wasn't rational. Science was not rational. It was based on money, profiteering, economics, and
mhm,
politics. but it claimed to be rational, and the existentialists, rather than confront the rise of the monster of science, this is Shelley, Frankenstein's monster. Frankenstein's monster represented the fascism and the dictatorship, the monster that medicine could become. And the existentialists, I guess, tired of fighting the war with Nazi Germany, particularly Camus and Sartre, refused to really cite the threat that science was posing. And as a result of it, they allowed science to claim to be rational, and then they supported the irrational. They claimed life was absurd. And they really couldn't deal with all the concepts directly. So they talked around it with about hundreds of pages of buzzwords.
Okay, and it was a wonderful way to summarize it. And life is absurd, and we can live a life with absurdity. And
Yes.
what's the name of this theory?
The name of the theory? Well, the
Yes,
book, there was a book called The Irrational Man,
yes.
which was,
And if you
we
have any
really,
questions,
yeah.
yeah, Melissa, I have to talk to you about our life, and I have been apologies, my apologies. I've been busy with some work, and I couldn't talk to you. And I'll talk to you soon, and we'll do our live. And thank you guys for joining us. Thank you, Linda. Thank you, Melissa, and any other. And thank you, Ed, for your wonderful thoughts and your wisdom, for sharing your wisdom. And guys, if you have any questions, leave it in the comment box below. I'll answer it to you. Ed will get back to you as soon as he can. And thank you, and I'll see you next week. Have a good day, good night, wherever you are.
Okay, bye.